Great. So people are joining, and I put something on the chat, welcoming everyone and asking people where they're from. We'll give another 10 seconds for people to join, and we'll get started. Perfect. All right. So welcome everyone to another episode of Data Futurology. In this series, or in this podcast and video YouTube series, we cover the topics that leaders in the data science, analytics, and machine learning space are facing. We want to discuss the challenges and the types of decisions that these leaders are making, and we want to bring to you different perspectives from executives from all around the world. We discuss use cases, and we get into the details of what went right, what went wrong, and what is the impact that was created by all these different efforts. Thank you so much for joining. So today we have it's a live webinar as we usually do, and it's being put out on YouTube as well for people to watch afterwards. And we have Kat from Sydney. Good morning. Thanks very much for everyone joining. I also want to say thank you to our sponsor who helps us with providing this content to you, Talent Insights, which is a fantastic recruitment company in the AI space around the east coast of Australia. So definitely show them some love. Today, we are going to be speaking about improving outcomes for citizens. It's from the perspective of New South Wales Government, the Department of Customer Service, and specifically we have Simon Herbert, who is the Chief Data Officer for the New South Wales Department of Customer Service. Simon, I'm very excited to have you on the show today. How are you going?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, very well. It's a beautiful day again in lovely Sydney.
Right, this is great. Thanks. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I've been very excited to speak with you. It's been fascinating to learn about the advancements that are going on in New South Wales Government and all the good work that you guys are doing. So I think it's going to be a fantastic episode. But to kick us off, could you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I think most people can probably tell by my accent. I wasn't born in Australia. I was actually born in the UK. I came through the technology route. So I did a degree in computer science and then went into software engineering. I then moved up through the sort of leadership in technology. And then, as you'll see, I decided to change my hat. And I jumped out of technology and moved into management consultancy. I did that for a number of years with IBM and Motorola. And then I emigrated to Australia in 2004. Here in Australia, really trying to find my feet. I ended up getting involved in sort of program management and transformation. So, and specifically in financial services, which I did for a number of years. And then back in 2017, I then joined the Department of Customer Services, or was then called DFSI, Finance. And I came in to just work in the Data Analytics Center. I knew a fair amount of data from a previous role as an IT director in a data marketing business back in the UK. And over the last 4 years, I've been working in the New South Wales Data Analytics Centre.
Awesome, that is great. And I'll ask you about the scope and the responsibilities of your role in just a second. But before, I should mention that we are using for everyone in the audience, we are using the Q&A function in Zoom. So if you have any questions that you would like us to answer, pop them in there. And for any questions that are there, you can give them a thumbs up, which gives us sort of an upvote, and we can see how many people are interested about hearing about that question. We also have the chat. So if you have any comments or any aha moments, anything that you particularly enjoyed, put them in the chat. And finally, we usually use the poll functionality. So we have 4 short questions today that are just all yes and no. I'll launch the poll now, so you get a pop-up to answer the poll. please fill it out, and we'll come back to the answers of the poll in a few minutes. So thanks for that. So Simon, could you tell me about the scope and the responsibilities that you have as Chief Data Officer?
Okay, so I actually have two roles.
Amazing.
So under the Chief Data Officer, I'm responsible for helping the Department of Customer Service implement the New South Wales Data Reform. And that's just literally kicked off after in the last kind of 4 or 5 months. And sort of in November, it went into one of the parliamentary committees, and it got approval to move forward. My other role is the Executive Director of Data Insights and Transformation in the Department of Customer Service. And I look after 3 operating units. The first one is the New South Wales Data Analytics Centre. The second one is the New South Wales Behavioural Insights Unit. And then the third one is the DCS, Department of Customer Service Transformation Unit. And so I have quite a broad role alongside my Chief Data Officer role as well.
Yes. No, please keep going.
I think that's quite enough. I think that's quite enough.
That is fantastic. No, thank you so much. And so you first mentioned the New South Wales Data Reforms. Could you tell us a bit more about them?
Yes, what happened was after COVID-19, there were a number of things that we did as part of the data response, which kind of woke everybody up to the value of data within New South Wales Government, a lot more than it had been in the past. And so we started to put together how we were going to structure this kind of improving the way that government uses data to deliver better outcomes for our citizens. And really, the reform came down into 3 key areas. The first was taking some of the really good practices that we'd done in COVID and making them part of the business as usual. The second one was to develop a New South Wales Government data strategy. We had data strategies in all of our clusters. So there are 10 clusters in New South Wales Government. But they were all going in different directions. So the whole idea was to harmonise those. We have a draft that is hopefully going to get approval by the Secretary's Board in late April, and then it will go up to Cabinet in late May. The third phase was around the Data Sharing Act. So when the Data Analytics Centre came into being back in 2015, the father of the DAC is a guy called Dr. Ian Opperman, and I'm quite sure a few people on this call know Ian. We had a corresponding act put into through Parliament around data sharing. That act has been okay, but it hasn't really achieved everything we wanted to getting data to flow around government to help those citizen outcomes. And so we've been doing what we call a statutory review. Most acts get reviewed every 5 years, and a number of recommendations will be being put forward to Cabinet for them to consider. And so we hope that there will be some changes to the way that works to help us actually get that data flowing and getting those insights, which then we can turn into action and improve our service delivery.
That is great. And yeah, I love the focus on improving citizen outcomes. What are some of the outcomes that you've been focusing on? Anything that you can share with us?
Okay, I think the last 12 months, the Data Analytics Centre has been very, very focused on COVID-19 and the data response. So on the 26th of March 2020, the decision was made by the Secretary's Board and by Cabinet that the DAC become that central coordinating unit for the data response to COVID. Now, obviously, COVID-19, the response is led by New South Wales Health, and as it should be. But we were then going to support them to do that. And really, the data response broke down into 3 areas. There was, how are we going to manage the infection risk? What is going to be the social impact of COVID-19? And then the third one was, how are we going to economically recover from COVID-19? So these 3 work streams, and in actual fact, Two of these work streams, well, they're all still ongoing, to be honest. But obviously, the level of activity has dropped as we're now moving more into the vaccination time within the infection risk. The social impacts have actually turned out to be what we call lag indicators. So, whilst there was the event of COVID and the lockdowns here in New South Wales, the actual impact of that and a social level could actually go on for some time. In actual fact, there are some studies in Europe which mean it could go up to at least 2 years.
Wow.
Economic recovery, obviously, you've seen a number of the stimuluses. We help collate that data, and at the moment, we're very focused on JobKeeper finishing and what is that impact on the small to medium-sized businesses. And so we are looking at how much financial stress those particular businesses are under, and seeing what we can do to help them out.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I've definitely seen great initiatives like the vouchers as well, the dining and entertainment vouchers. They're great initiative.
Yeah, so that's obviously run by our partner organisation, Service New South Wales, which is part of the Department of Customer Service. What we do is we've been taking that data, okay, and I would like to note that it is de-identified, okay, so we're not passing personal information around government just as we feel like. That the Privacy Commissioner would not be happy.
Yeah, right.
So we de-identify that. It's held securely on our advanced analytics service, and we've been analysing how many people have actually been applying for the vouchers, how many people have been redeeming those vouchers, and then how much, when they redeem, the cost of the voucher versus actually how much they spent, because the whole idea is to get the economy going. So I don't think that I can give this at the moment. When they redeem a voucher, they're normally spending another $18, $19 on top of the original voucher. So that's great. That's just money flowing around through the economy, and I think that's extremely useful.
Yeah, super useful. That's fantastic and interesting. Well, I was really interested to hear about the three areas of the COVID response, about the infection risk, the social impact, and the economic recovery. And you definitely said that the social impact seems to be a lagging indicator. What can you tell us? What more could you tell us about the infection risk side, and what was the work that happened there early on?
So the start of COVID was just a blur. We all worked 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. And the most important thing was to actually build trust with our citizens. So we needed to get information in the hands of the citizens. And so our Premier basically launched what we called the COVID heat map, which can be found on newsouthwales.gov.au. And that actually showed the number of cases that are occurring at a postcode level across the state. At first, we just did, the infection cases. Then we did testing, and we hope, depending on whether or not the federal government who are controlling the vaccinations will share the data, we would like to add the vaccinations into that. So you can look at your postcode, you kind of understand what's going on with COVID. So you know how many infections are occurring in your postcode, you understand how many how much testing's being done, and we hope to, at some point, report that vaccinations as well.
That is great. Well, I know that at least from my side, I was using that website and looking up the information around the infections and the testing, like multiple times a week, checking on how it was going, and it was really comforting to be able to access that amount of detail so quickly and so regularly. So it was very comforting from that side.
I think we've been trying to be as transparent as possible. That's one of the great things about data, is that we have the open data portal, data.newsouthwales, and we were publishing that data onto that open portal at the same time. People were then taking that data, citizen data scientists, as I like to call them. They were creating apps and all kinds of things. It was excellent. But we, at the same time, because of privacy, we deployed a thing called the Privacy Information Factor, the PIF tool, which was actually created by Dr. Ian Opperman. And this is a mathematical tool that basically looks at any data set and works out the level of risk around re-identification.
Wow.
So we worked very, very carefully to make sure that the open data we were supplying was not going to allow re-identification. And that actually seems to have been pretty effective.
That's incredible. That definitely would appease a lot of or concerns that some people might have. But having that high bar of rigor, testing rigor before sharing the data, it's outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks.
That's really good. And I know that obviously a lot of the recent focus has been on the COVID response, and it's been an amazing piece of work so far. But are there any other citizen outcomes or use cases that you could share with us?
There've been the DAC's been going since 2015, and I think we've just broken through 100 projects that we've delivered across the sector or the state.
Wow.
So yeah, we've got a few to choose from. I'll try and pick a couple that actually make sense. I think one that people would understand is around the compulsory third party. So I don't know if you remember, but probably 2 years ago now, the compulsory third party cost went down. And that was due to CIRA, the State Insurance Regulatory Authority. But the DAC was supporting CIRA in how they were looking at the data that was coming in from the insurers, both the actual claims and the contracts or the policies, and becoming a lot more efficient and productive around how we looked at those, and giving the information into the decision makers to understand how the CTP scheme was working. And so that actually led to us being able to reduce the price. And we're actually taking that data from the insurers in near real time now. They are, through the use of APIs, etc. That data is flowing in, it's being processed, okay, and then it's landing onto the advanced analytics service, and we're running a number of analytical models across that data. So yeah, I'd like to say that the DAC was a little bit involved in and helping reduce the costs of insuring your car here or your motorbike here in New South Wales.
Yeah, definitely. That's impressive to be able to increase the understanding of what is actually happening and the risk to find out the amount of exposure that there is and the amount of funds that is required to support that. And yeah, then it obviously becoming a lot more accurate over time. That is fantastic progress.
Yeah, no, and CIRA is continuing to develop their models, and with our minister Dominello. If anybody's on LinkedIn, you can't really miss the minister. He posts quite regularly. The minister is still always actively encouraging, where can we get some more productivity? How can we give the benefits back to the citizens? How can we make this easier? It's very useful to have such an enthusiastic minister looking after our portfolio.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. And tell me, how big is the data analytics center that the New South Wales government has?
Okay, so in number of people, it's around about 50 people.
Nice.
We're divided into 3 key groups. There are the data science group, so that's the analysts and the data scientists. And I should note, I am not a data scientist, okay? I definitely came from, I like to call myself the plumber. I'm a guy who puts the pipes together with the data.
Extremely important piece.
Yeah, and that's fact. We like to say that, the analysts get all the glory when they create the insights, but in actual fact, the engineers are the ones who do all that, the munging. So we call it the 80-20 rule. The analysts, they walk off and they go, look at the insights I've delivered. And the engineers say, yeah, but I got you the data and I got it in a format that allows you to do the analysis. We have some people who do both, but yeah, I don't want to create any rivalry. That's not going to be. So we have the data science team. We then have the data services team. They basically they have the data engineering, and they also have the service management team that look after all of the products we deliver. I've talked about the advanced analytics services being one of those. And then the final team is the Data.New South Wales team.
Mhm.
They are basically responsible for our open data portal, but they also look after all the policy and the strategy. So the strategy was coordinated out of that group. And they also have the data governance. It's very important that you have data governance outside of data science or data services. You know, there is a Chinese wall to make sure that a steward can actually go up and say, no, you're not allowed. You can't do that. You know, the privacy impact assessment's not occurred, that we cannot release. That's really important to have those kind of controls in place.
Yes. Yeah. No, definitely is the checks and balances that as recipients of the value, it's things that as a citizen, it's things that we want to hear that are working and that are in place and working.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the other side is the technology. So we are 100% in the cloud.
Nice.
We use the 3 key commercial clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP. And that's because each of the clouds have their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so for processing of certain things, certain clouds are stronger. We've spent a long time developing our agile culture. So we very much believe in agility, that whole idea of servant leader. So believe it or not, I work for the team, not they work for me.
Nice.
I think it's really important to do those things. And we have, when we create teams with our customers, we very much, we want them to engage fully with their business leads and making sure they have their product owners there. And we're doing showcases and all the good things we have as part of the agile process, which I don't need to tell everybody, most people would be very familiar with that. But I think that agile and analytics go really well together. Right.
Yes. And I would have guessed that it's something that you guys have focused on, because if the center has been running for about 5 years, or maybe just over 5 years, coming up to 6, and you guys have delivered 100 projects, that shows that rate that rate of delivery shows that things, that the work is flowing quickly, is being done in an agile way, it's well managed, and I'm sure that there's a lot of projects in the pipeline as well. So to be having a rate of essentially 20 releases a year on different projects and different products is a high bar.
Well, okay, so the record, and we're not saying this is the bar anymore because it was extraordinary times. We had the first version of the heat map out within 3 weeks.
Wow.
So we built it, we sourced the data, cleaned the data, built the visual, embedded the visual into the website, and we do all that in 3 weeks. I wouldn't recommend the work level that we did to do that, but at the time it was really important to get there, so we did.
Yeah, definitely, and for the citizens, it was very comforting to have that information at fingertips. So it was definitely worth the effort and the pain during those 3 weeks to get it out so quickly. It was very comforting to be able to access that at any point in time on demand. I also wanted to ask you about the behavioral insights piece. So you mentioned that was one of your areas. What could you tell us about that side?
So behavioral insights, I think sometimes gets a bit of a bad reputation. A lot of negative people think about behavioral insights. It is a way that government uses to nudge citizens to do certain things. I think that's a really poor view. I would suggest that what behavioral insights does is actually improves outcomes by understanding people better and their behavior. And I'll give you an example. One of the problems the state had over the last couple of years was that we couldn't get enough rural teachers. And it was a significant problem. And we worked with the Department of Education on this. And one of the behavioral insight specialists went in and looked at the process of recruiting and placement and everything else regarding rural teachers. They found that there was, inside one system, there was a drop down which automatically defaulted to Sydney. And so what they did, okay, was they basically changed that default. And believe it or not, we had a significant uptake of rural teachers on a temporary basis going out. And that's what behavioral insights is all about. It's about, they have such a deep understanding of behavior, and the way that they do their testing first, their control groups, and then their rollouts. It's very scientific, and they can make a significant impact on a number of outcomes throughout the state.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, and no, I definitely have heard the difficulties of filling in positions for teachers in rural areas, and obviously, there's kids wanting to learn. So it's fantastic to hear and to see that the government is implementing good processes to improve that. Sorry,
I'll give you another example. So when you go for a COVID test, okay, we were noticing that some people were having a COVID test and then they weren't isolating. So the behavioral insights unit and their specialists went and watched the process in a number of areas, and they made a number of key, very important changes to the way that when somebody has a test, how they actually, that interaction between the individual who's being tested and the New South Wales Health person. And just getting to a point where once they had their test, okay, the person would lean in and say, okay, here's your postcard with your details about how to find your result. So what are you going to do now? And by asking the question, okay, they go, I'm going to go home and I'm going to isolate for 48 hours. And if they don't say that, then the whole way that the script was developed was, so you're going to go home now and you're going to isolate until you get your results. Yes? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And these ways, a lot of people say, oh, that's just common sense. It's, to be honest, common sense is sometimes not that common.
That's right. That's right. And I love that you're finding that in the data and in creating the improvements in this case, to make us all safer. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
well, it's the team. It's not me. It's the team.
Oh, of course, but I love the focus in this area. That's great, and yeah, applications that I didn't know that the government was focusing on, which is fantastic. The other area that you mentioned was around transformation. So the transformation of the department around a couple of different avenues. Could you share a little bit about what that is and how it's going?
Yeah. The idea is the Department of Customer Services is going to become the most customer-centric, department in New South Wales and in Australia. Service New South Wales, as we know, have a fantastic customer culture. But that's a fact. The Department of Customer Services is made up, nearly 50% of it is made up of very different areas. One of those is the Births, Deaths and Marriages registry. And this is a very important registry for anybody who is born in New South Wales and lives in New South Wales. And so the team in the transformation unit did a lot of work about how they could improve that customer experience. So as you know, everybody hates waiting in queues at counters. Okay. So one of the things they launched was what they call the click and collect. So basically, I'd like a copy of my birth certificate. Okay, please. Yeah. The other thing was that they actually moved instead of us only having 2 or 3 very specialized counters to go and do that first deaths and marriages, instead now that's now been moved into Service New South Wales contact centres. So guess what? That means you can go a number of places, and now they all have the click and collect, or some of them have the click and collect booths, which allow you to just go in, collect your stuff, and thanks very much. So these are just 2 examples of how the transformation unit has basically taken that real customer centricity view about how can we make this easier for the customer, put the customer in the center and make all of the services rotate around that, rather than, okay, here are 10 different departments and you need to understand how one of the problems here for anybody in Australia is, do I talk to the local council, do I talk to the state department, or do I talk to the federal department? And we need to ensure that we need to make it easier for the citizens going forward. And it's one of our Premier's priorities was, make government easy. And that's what we're trying to do.
Oh, and I at least from a citizen and a customer perspective, I can tell you that it's impressive. So I moved to New South Wales just over a year ago. And obviously we had to, for example, move our licenses. So we moved from Victoria and we had to renew here. We had to change the license plates and go to Service New South Wales. And it was something that I personally was, without having any information about how quick the process was going to be, I assumed it was going to be very slow, and I was dreading the visit. And when I had to do it, I was pleasantly surprised at the speed and the service. And here I live in Newcastle, and I work in healthcare, and I started a data science team here, and most people have moved from interstate or from overseas to come and work with us. And I can tell you, everyone has been impressed with Service New South Wales on how easy and how quick the visits have been and how helpful the people have been there. And so it really shows the work that you guys have been doing in the background.
Thank you. Service are an amazing organisation, and Damon Rees, the CEO, is very focused, and the minister has always been very like, what is it going to make it easier for our citizens and our customers?
Amazing. And so to enable a lot of these improvements, there's some large pieces of work that are going on in the background. One of them, and we put one of these in the poll questions. Actually, I see that over 90% of people have answered the poll, which is fantastic. So I'll close the poll and we can go through the answers and discuss it that way. So people should be able to see the poll answers. The first question was, were you aware of the New South Wales Government data response to COVID-19? So just over the majority had said no, that they weren't aware before this. So it was great to get that out there. Any thoughts or comments on that, Simon?
I think anybody who works in the data in data knows that you're part of the back room. The service delivery is by somebody in a contact center, somebody on a telephone, or maybe in a digital chat. The insights and the way that interaction occurs normally is assisted by data. And I think I've always, and to be honest, I quite like the fact that we're part of the back room. That's what we do. We're a support. We basically help those frontline services deliver a better service to customers. And so I'm not unhappy that half people hadn't heard around the data response. I think that's really good, because really it wasn't about the data response itself. It was actually about how New South Wales responded to COVID.
Yeah, and definitely creating that security and comfort in the citizens' minds during a really troubling time. And I thought that's something you guys did particularly well. Yeah. Sorry, go.
Well, I was just going to go to number 2, the deep learning. Yes, we do use deep learning. Obviously, there is quite a lot of concern by people around the ethics of AI. And so you need to be very careful how you use that. both
Mm.
internally from a concern of citizens, but also internally from employees feeling that they may lose their jobs because they're going to be replaced by a deep learning algorithm. And so, the application of deep learning definitely can give some significant benefits, and I can talk about a particular outcome we did. But you do need to make sure that everybody understands the benefits. You haven't put any bias in and all the other things.
Yeah.
We need to be very careful around deep learning.
Great. Let's dive in. Can you tell us about some of the applications or how you guys are using deep learning models in New South Wales government?
Yeah, I think the Data Analytics Centre would not say that we are a deep learning expert. We have done a number of pilots with a number of different areas around the sector. But the one that I can talk about is that we were approached by New South Wales Procurement, and they said that New South Wales procures a significant amount of services, and especially IT services. And inside the IT services, within the general ledger, was the category of other. And New South Wales Procurement were always struggling to be able to categorize this particular area. What we did was basically, there was I think it was a million rule engine that was trying to categorize all these things, either by company or by description. What we did was
all created by hand, right? Those million rules beforehand.
Over many years. So what we did, we thought this was a great candidate for implementing deep learning. And so we did 2 sets of training and then run it across the whole base. And what happened was we then started doing some comparisons, or New South Wales Procurement were doing comparisons, and they actually found that the deep learning algorithm was actually ending up giving a better classification than the rule engine and the human kind of view. So that was an example of how deep learning can really add to the productivity of New South Wales Government, which again links back to our Premier's priority of being a world-class public service. We're meant to be, you pay your taxes, and we should be looking after that very carefully indeed and being as productive as possible.
Yeah, no, that is a very well-picked application, and that's definitely a problem that is quite common across industries. As I mentioned before, I work in healthcare, and when we look at expenses and whether the costs are being paid out, the other bucket is always quite high, generally in the top 3 or top 5. So being able to look into that and be able to properly classify is a huge benefit. So yeah, well done. And sorry, any other comments on that side?
No, but we know that the use of deep learning is going to increase. And the thing is to make sure that you have a really have a really good use case. Everybody understands the benefits. You make sure that you've got a good stakeholder engagement around that, rather than somebody goes, oh, come on, let's just go do some deep learning. You need to take the time to make sure that everybody is comfortable with it, both with our customers externally, with our citizens, and internally with our New South Wales employees.
That is great, because there's definitely a risk of people sometimes by wanting to use kind of like the shiny new toy. Sometimes we want to jump straight into that. But what I really liked about one of your comments before, that you said we're not a deep learning center. That what that says to me is, like, there are many analytical tools, and the spectrum is very, very broad. And all of these tools are helpful, are useful, and we can put them to use to the right application. And it's a matter that you guys are choosing and selectively about when to apply what for the right problem. So that is a fantastic approach.
Yeah. No, we would like to do more. I will be honest. We would like to do more.
No, fantastic. And question 3 was about digital transformations and data transformations. So could you tell us a little bit about each of those and how you think about them and how you've been approaching them?
I think digital transformation is the buzzword at the moment, especially with COVID, forced a lot of businesses, they had to open the digital channel where they might have been quite traditional and they didn't want to. I think that you need to be very careful with digital transformation, because there is a cohort within, especially when we think about the 8 million citizens in New South Wales, there's a cohort that do not want to use digital. They want to use the counter or they want to use the telephone. So the whole omni-channel must be considered. And I think sometimes we get so carried away with, oh, we can reduce the cost of service if we implement, we push everybody to the digital channel. And I think you need to be a little bit careful about that. My second point is really to do with this question is digital transformations are wholly dependent, and I'm being controversial now, are wholly dependent on a successful data transformation underneath. You can create a beautiful website or a great app, okay, a great digital experience, okay, but if you don't have the integration, the data, and the flow underneath, and the automation, okay, your digital transformation is basically just painting lipstick.
That's right.
You know where I'm coming from.
Yeah. No, that is fantastic, and such the right perspective, because you need kind of like the brains behind the new shiny interface. So the digital side needs the brains that are provided through the data flows and the data processing behind it. How has your journey been on both of those sides?
I'm not sure I really understand the question. Can you?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of I guess what can you tell us about the data transformation? What you've included as part of that, or any parts of the journey that you can share?
Okay, data transformation is really difficult. What normally happens, okay, is you will have a number of transactional systems that have data stores that have been locked inside those applications for a very long time. Getting that data out is really difficult. And then if you need to update or synchronize that data, then the difficulty really starts to become. So the problem is what you have is proliferation of copies of data. I remember a certain organization, I won't mention their name, they had 3 global master customer data sets. And basically they built one 10 years ago, and they built one 7 years ago, and they built one 3 years ago. And because of the integration on each of those, they were unable to sunset those. And so your tech debt is just going up and up and up. So data integration, synchronization of data, unlocking the application silos are 3 really difficult challenges within a data transformation, in my opinion. That's not even going into getting the data onto the lake, the linkages, and getting your data warehouse to effectively support your decision making. Just talking about that actual first part, getting the data anywhere near your lake or your warehouse.
Huge. Yeah, it's such a crucial part. What type of advice would you have for people who are wanting to guide their organizations to better understand the challenges of the data transformation behind the digital transformation?
So the problem again with data transformations is that they are under the bonnet. Okay, the digital transformation, if you like, is the really nice spray job on the car. Okay, but that's the fact that the data transformation is the actual rebuilding of the engine. And so the problem is that a lot of organizations can be quite short-sighted in the fact that they only look at, I need the new looking car to attract the customer, okay, without actually knowing that if the engine doesn't work, your customer satisfaction and everything's going to be really impacted.
Yeah.
And so I think that data professionals need to really team up with digital professionals really well. And both parties need to really doff the hat to the other, which is, I understand, digital professional, that you are going to take the data that I've produced or the insights I'm producing, and you're going to create that experience for the customer. Okay, but vice versa, digital professional, please give the respect to the data professional who's actually going to make that data and those insights available to you. Next best actions or all things like that. It has to be. Now, in the startup world and in the data companies, they don't see it as data and digital. It's very much a merged situation. But in larger organizations, in the corporates and in government, we definitely have that two different areas. And so therefore it's that integration and how those two work together is really key.
Fantastic. That is great. Yeah, really helpful perspectives there to raise the profile of what's happening under the bonnet, as you say. It's important to discuss and for people to be aware of the challenges and the importance. So it's great. The last question that we had in the poll was whether people have heard of the New South Wales Government Data Analytics Centre. So I guess good to hear that people are getting becoming more informed about the centre exists and the type of work that is being done in the centre. Any other thoughts to share?
Yeah, so the New South Wales Data Analytics Centre is the grandfather of DACs in Australia. There are now DACs in Victoria, in South Australia and Queensland. Tasmania are starting to build up theirs. Northern Territories and Western Australia are all they're all on their journey. And so having that centralized data analytics capability inside a government brings a lot of really key advantages. And I think that was quite eloquently shown by COVID. Without that centralized kind of area, you would really struggle. Capability, you would really struggle to be able to coordinate it and bring the data together quickly and effectively to help our citizens. So yeah, for me personally, I'm quite happy that not many people know about the DAC. That's okay. We'll keep doing the good things on behalf of our citizens.
Yeah, that is fantastic. No, thank you. I'll stop sharing the poll results now. And I was wondering, with the amount of diverse work that you guys are tackling, are there any other different areas where you would have applied the analytics that you could share with us? Any other types of use cases that might be different to the ones we've discussed?
Okay, so I'll give you a bit of a preview. I think the Minister will be publishing on LinkedIn about this very shortly. Working with our partner T Corp, so that's the Treasury Corporation. Their chief economist came up with a really good idea. So the ABS, the federal that does a lot of the economic measurement, etc., releases its results every 3 months. COVID basically told us that we need to be far more responsive than every 3 months. So he put up that there were some possible lead indicators in the activity that occurs across the state, which we could actually correlate to the economic activity of New South Wales. And so it's officially called the State Final Demand, SFD. And what we did was, on the suggestion of T Corp, we took that State Final Demand and then we reached out to our partners in Transport New South Wales, and we got hold of all the heavy freight data. So this is all the heavy freight moving around the state. And what we did was we then worked out which roads correlated, using correlation graph, which roads correlated as closely to the SFD as we can. Now, we've been running this now for a little while. We get basically near real-time updates of the SFD, but of the data on the heavy freight through a system called SCAT. What we can now do is we can actually take that heavy freight index, okay, and we can start to predict the economic health of the state. It's only one indicator, and the chief economist believes we should include 4 or 5 others, but we haven't had time to build those yet. But we can now, with a reasonable variance, okay, it's not between 5 and 10%, we can actually predict the SFD using the heavy freight index.
What?
So what that allows us to do is, on a monthly basis, we can actually track the economic, because the correlation, we know that the correlation's been reasonably good. We can actually track a lead indicator to the New South Wales economy rather than waiting for the federal quarterly update. I would like to say we didn't come up with this idea. In actual fact, our friends across the pond in New Zealand actually came up with it. They called it Truckometer. But we've taken it and we've been able to make it work for us. But it's it's still in pilot stage, but it's definitely delivering some interesting results.
Man, that is incredible, and I love the breadth of the work that is available. The breadth of the data analytics work that is available for people through the government, and the positive impacts that you guys are having across so many areas of our lives. Because, for example, this example that you just mentioned about predicting the state final demand, that is equivalent to what the venture capitalists are doing, where they get satellite images of the car parks. This is obviously just pre-COVID, but they get satellite images of car parks of shopping centers to try and estimate the retail demand. And some people think, that they have to go into like high finance or venture capitalists to have interesting problems at that scale. But the other side of the coin is that in government you can have similar technical challenges, but with a much nicer application in terms of improving citizen outcome.
Yeah, we're not venture capitalists at all. I think it was really brought home to me by we had a commercial data scientist come and work with us for a little while, and most data scientists work in the areas of risk or marketing. Those are the kind of key areas that, and this lady, after about 3 days, came up to me and she said, "I can't believe the data you've got." She just said, "I can't believe what you've got." And I went, "Yeah, we know we've got some good data." And she just said, "Do you know what you could do with it?" And we went, "Yeah, we do. It's just a matter of time. We can, if we can get 3 or 4 more of those lead indicators going, that allows us to really inform, the senior public servants and the political layer, the ministers and cabinet, and that gives them. They can then think about, how they can continue to, help the economy to recover from, as we are at the moment, from COVID or any other situation. We've got some good data.
Yeah, very great data, great challenges, fantastic applications, and we had a question from somebody saying that they're super impressed with all the work that is happening. And in the analytics space in New South Wales government. And the question was about getting a job. And there was, do I have to have permanent residency status to work in the New South Wales government data center? And if not, then how do I get a job there?
Unfortunately, I believe, and I'd have to check this with HR, but I think you need to be a permanent resident or a citizen to work in New South Wales Data Analytics Centre. You will also need to have had police checks and working with children and a number of other. We have to make sure, because of the kind of data that we hold.
Yeah.
The 5 safes. One of them is about safe people. But I do hope you get your permanent residency, and then very happy for. There's a website called I Work for New South Wales, and in fact, I'm recruiting for a director at the moment. So please check it out if you want.
So I work for New South Wales. Did you say it was a website? Great one to check. And if the person is from overseas, I can tell you when I came to Australia, I came from South America, from Chile. And it took me a long time to get PR and then citizenship. And the way that I found really helpful was with working with small to medium businesses, because you're able to hopefully provide a lot of value, and then they're happy to sponsor you, and then you get to stay in the country. So apply the analytics that you're learning on to help small to medium businesses, and then you're in, and you can come and work for the government. So that's great. I think we may have time for one more question. Looking at the time, I can't believe it's gone by so quickly. So there's two questions. So tell me which one you would prefer. There's one around data systems and data warehousing, and essentially what you use or how do you consolidate all the data. And the other one is around path to production. So taking models or analyses to production, so they're available for the non-technical users to interact with them. Do you have a preference on either of those?
Okay, they're both difficult questions.
Yeah.
Good questions. I'll try and answer both really quickly.
Amazing.
On integrating the data to the data warehouse, etc., we have a very formalized approach using data stewards. They interact with the custodian. We get the data, so we can receive data in many different ways. And one of the things about the Data Analytics Center is we need to be able to support that. So if it needs to come by API, secure file transfer protocol, direct connection, there are many different ways of doing it. But then the most important thing is that privacy impact, privacy review. Let's look at the data. Let's see if there's anything on there that shouldn't be. And then obviously profile the data. The first thing you've got to do with data is profile it. Check you haven't got some really spurious data before it gets fed on. That would be my on that side. On operationalization, yes. Okay, so this I think this is the area that is probably the move to inserting automated operational insights, using various different models, deep learning, machine learning, etc. Okay, is probably a key area of focus for New South Wales government in the next couple of years. We are doing this on maybe a weekly or monthly or whatever basis. Now that as our minister has a real interest and in moving as close as we can to real time. The thing is that the level of investment required to insert some of these things in at an automated operational real-time basis is very expensive. Yes. And as public servants, we have to always consider that investment and the return on that investment.
Amazing, and it's definitely a huge undertaking and a challenge that organizations in every industry are facing right now about productionizing, scaling AI and machine learning models, and what does that look like. And we actually have through Data Futurology, we have an episode coming up on Tuesday to talk about machine learning or operationalizing machine learning models and putting them into production. So I just put the link on the chat for anyone who wants to join that conversation. And on that episode on Tuesday, we're going to talk about the different levels of the path or the ladder, the maturity ladder that you can take to take models to production, and starting with step one, doing models in batch, or predicting in batch and writing back to a table, and then having systems sort of take that table, and then how do you go from there to a real-time API, which in this sort of maturity model we have as level 5. So for anyone that's interested, come along and hear all the different levels. Simon, what can I tell you? This has been amazing, mate. Super impressive. The breadth of the work on the applications, the impact on the citizens, the exciting work that you guys are doing. It's extremely impressive. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your journey, your perspectives, your insights. It's been a blast and fantastic.
Thanks, Felipe, and thanks for everybody. I hope you found this useful.
100%. Thank you so much. And for everyone who's interested, come back to hear about productionizing machine learning models. Come back on Tuesday. Also check out this video on YouTube, and it'll be coming out on the podcast shortly as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend, and see you next week.